For instance, I was just doing some manscaping. I had a guard on a set of trimmers for safety, and somehow managed to stab or tear my nutsack open anyway. Fear not, it is only a flesh wound. Not enough to warrant calling for help, but just enough to make me sit there pinching my skin for 45 minutes, reflecting on exactly the level of foolishness I just performed. What's your story? Edit. For some reason, I'm gonna claim blood loss. I used my alternate account to post this and not my main, and it is way more successful than any of my other posts ever were. F my life. Story 1. I was alone in the room when I felt the urge to readjust myself. I was wrist deep down there when my boss angrily came in. We stared at each other for half a second, and he left. I never figured out what he was angry about. Story 2. In ninth grade, I decided my face was dry, so I grabbed some of Mom's moisturizer. I woke up the next morning, looked in the mirror. Yeah, it was moisturizing tanning lotion. I told my classmates I fell asleep with my reading lamp on. I'm not sure which was more embarrassing, the mistake or the excuse. Story 3. I once was doing some grooming in my parents' bathroom over their toilet. It was my first time doing it, so there was a lot of hair. I forgot to flush the toilet and my parents made fun of me for a week. Story 4. I was on a Skype for business conference call at work and thought I was on mute. I let out a loud fart, amplified by the acoustics of spandex underwear and a wooden chair. I was not on mute. Furthermore, because no one else was talking, it displayed me as the active speaker with my picture for the next 5 to 10 seconds so everyone knew. Story 5. Freshman year of college, a rather good-looking girl was sitting on my dorm room bed at 2 a.m., peeling the wrapping off a plastic bottle. She then said, "Did you know that people who peel the wrapping off bottles like this are sexually frustrated?" My reply was, "Huh, you learn something new every day." She left, and I would go on being a virgin for a little while longer. Story 6. I had a condition that needed adult circumcision. The doctor told me to keep my genital area as clean as possible, so I didn't engage in daily activities for a few days. While getting the cut and suture, my body reacted involuntarily. It was the weirdest sensation with all the feelings removed because of the medication. I could feel the spasm of my muscles around that area, and I know the nurse dabbed my pelvis and stomach to remove the fluid. There were about a doctor and maybe 3 nurses. They quietly just mopped it up and continued like nothing happened. I'm so glad I would never have to see their faces again. Story 7. A buddy of mine sat on his balls in the pub one night. I spent about 5 minutes making fun of him, went to the bar for drinks, came back, and sat on my balls. Edit. Lots of guys in the replies feeling smart because they have never sat on their balls. The day is coming, guys, and I want you to picture my face when it does. Picture my face right on your balls. Story 8. I was on FaceTime with my crush for the first time, and I accidentally let out a huge fart. There's no way she didn't hear it, but I just acted like nothing happened. Story 9. Thought I was alone in the back room at work, so I decided to pick the annoying booger out of my nose instead of getting a tissue like a grown man. A coworker came around the corner when I was somewhere between 1 and 2 knuckles deep. I stood there frozen like the busted child I was, not daring to remove my finger in fear of exposing the mess I was trying to expel from my nostril. I panicked and just said, "Hi, Barbara." Finger still in and all. She just sort of stared for a second and continued walking past. We never mentioned the incident again, but after 10 years, my anxiety likes to cripple me with this memory. Story 10. Didn't happen to me, but there was a contractor on the phone in our lobby with one of his guys talking about a job. When their conversation was finished, he said, "Love you," then immediately went, "Oh, sorry, man." Force of habit from talking to my wife. Not sure if that's what you were looking for, but it was pretty funny. Story 11. I was vacuuming a pool with a pool vacuum, and I started pulling it out while it was still on, as it's easier to drain it if it's in shallow water. Then it attached itself to my left testicle through my board shorts, and I genuinely thought I was going to be castrated by a pool vacuum. Edit. Some people are understandably confused. I live in Australia, and it gets really hot, so instead of standing out of the pool and guiding the vacuum with a pole, I put on a scuba mask and guide it with my hand. Also, that's a lot of upvotes. Story 12. I was like 13 or 14, and I came home from school one day, went into the bathroom, sat on top of the toilet, and started going to wank town. Life is stressful at that age. Okay? I didn't realize it because I was busy exercising this new ability of mine, but my foot was against the door, skate shoes still on, causing it to knock in the frame. It sounded like a miniature version of a headboard knocking against a wall during sex. To my abject horror, Mom comes by and yells, "What's going on? Are you all right?" I stammer out, I, I'm, I'm kicking the door. Okay? As if that makes any sense at all. We never spoke of it again, but I knew she knew. I told my friend this story, and he now calls jerking off kicking the door. Story 13. We live next to the main street between cantons. I live in Switzerland, but our balcony is on the side that's away from the street and covered by a big tree. So usually I'm fairly comfortable getting a breath of fresh air in the morning, even in underpants. One day I was setting up my usual coffee after just getting up, walked outside in boxers and a bad case of morning wood, and realized too late that about a dozen teenagers on a camping trip, led by a young woman, were standing on the trail next to the main street. So I stood there for a couple of seconds, flagpole raised just above the fence, before I slowly slid back into the house. I'm not sure if it's related, but we haven't seen any campers around here since. Story 14. In early middle school, I went to use the bathroom in the school urinals. I forgot to unzip my pants before I started and had urine running down my leg and all over my pants. I started to panic. There was only one other kid in the room, and I begged him to tell me what to do. I knew he was a special needs kid, but he was my only hope. He got scared and left the bathroom. I ended up having to leave with a sweatshirt wrapped around my waist, but that certainly didn't cover the smell. Story 15. I don't know if this is allowed, as I'm telling this tale on behalf of my boyfriend, but this story is too funny not to be shared here. Once upon a time, my boyfriend had just experienced his first wet dream. However, when he took off his boxers to take a shower, his goo was black. Keep in mind, he had never been informed, warned, or educated on wet dreams. So he sees this weird black goo and starts absolutely panicking and calls for his mom. So his mom and little sister run into the bathroom and are staring into his semen-filled boxer briefs. Yikes. She's never seen anything like it, so she takes him to the doctor. Turns out he had just bought new boxers, and the black was just the lint kind of mixing into his semen and changed the color. My boyfriend learned about wet dreams from his doctor. Story 16. I pulled an all-nighter, and I was hanging out in the history library with the history club at my campus. The club is mostly girls, and I ended up falling asleep in a chair. I popped an erection while I was sleeping, and I got woken up by a bunch of girls giggling and laughing at me. Story 17. In 8th grade, I had a PowerPoint presentation in front of the whole class. I got an erection, but instead of hiding it, I rocked it out the whole time. I don't know why I did that. Yikes. Story 18. I was 9 years old. I climbed a football post until I reached the bar. Those of you who played football know some of these posts have several hooks on them. While climbing back down, I slipped and got my scrotum stuck on one of the hooks on the post. After visiting 3 hospitals and a week later, I got it stitched and got scarred on my balls for life. Story 19. Definitely not my most embarrassing, but embarrassing nonetheless. Every guy knows the classic tuck in the waistband move. Well, in 8th grade, I'm using the waistband, and the bell rings, so I get up and gather my things. I look across the room, and a girl I know is just fixated right on my groin region with a look like she just saw a ghost. Then immediately we make eye contact, and she sprints out of the room. Not 100% sure, but my private area very well could have peeked out in first period that morning. Story 20. So, I went to college for 1 semester when I was in my early 20s. The campus gym had a get in shape for spring break 6-week class. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we would meet up and do some kind of exercise, and it always varied. We generally met in this dance studio and then would go play basketball, ultimate frisbee, and more. I should mention that I am a bigger guy, not morbidly obese, but not thin and in good shape. I am outgoing and get along with everyone even if I do not know anyone. I do get a lot more reserved and introverted if I feel uncomfortable or there is a chance where I can embarrass myself. I was in the dance studio one Wednesday, and I noticed I was one of the only guys there so far. Well, the instructor, whom I did not recognize, but we had guest instructors from time to time, says, "Okay, everyone grab a mat. It's yoga time." At this point, all the female students take off whatever they were wearing and are all in yoga clothes. They were all good-looking. Some of them were jaw-droppingly beautiful. So at this point, I was thinking, all right, women would love a guy who can do yoga. They are all attractive, and yoga is just stretching. I can stretch. They will love a guy who does yoga. Now, if you have done yoga before, you know it's not just stretching. Well, I quickly learned that after the first exercise, and I was already sweating. Long story short, in that hour-long class, I moved my body into positions that I did not know I could. I had never been more sweaty and out of breath. My shirt was literally dripping so much sweat it looked like I had taken a shower with it. I was so embarrassed and uncomfortable by the end that I could not even look at any of the women in the class in the face. I was so ready to get out of there. After I put my mat up, the instructor grabbed it and put it aside. She then asked if I could grab some extra towels to mop up where I was sitting. After I mopped up, I was ready to leave. I was never going back to the class. As I'm leaving, I run into one of the regular class instructors who says, "Joseph, we missed you the last 2 classes." I say, "What do you mean? I was there today for the yoga." She says, "Oh, the yoga class used our usual room. We were outside today. I took the normal yoga class that was not part of the Get in Shape class. In summary, I accidentally took a yoga class and did terribly with 20 attractive women whom I could not look at by the end." Story 21. Recently, I was at a corporate group training. They served breakfast and there was bacon. While eating, I dropped a piece right on my crotch. I spent the day with bacon grease stains on my crotch that looked like dribble marks. Being bacon grease, it wasn't like I could wash them out in the men's room with water. I had to grin and bear it all day. Story 22. I once walked into the stockroom when I was working at a department store. It was hot and I had been busy. On top of that, my girlfriend at the time convinced me to use hair removal cream for some reasons. So, there I was, rushing into the stockroom, assuming it was empty, feeling uncomfortable. I am lactose intolerant, but I had given in and had a milkshake at lunch. What happened next was probably the most unpleasant sound ever, as if something monstrous was unleashed from me. It was oddly satisfying, and I couldn't help but make a noise. We had a temporary employee working for us. She was in the back, in the next row, getting familiar with our stockroom layout. I heard her exclaim, "Oh my God!" As if she was in fear. She ran from the room, and we never talked. I'm glad my anecdote is bringing people to tears for a good reason this time. To the temporary worker from 2005 in Northeast North Carolina, if this is you, please message me. I would love to apologize and tell you about how much better it's been since I discovered lactose-free products. Story 23. It amazes me no one hasn't come out with something to trim our balls with. We put a sport utility vehicle-size rover on Mars using what's called a sky crane but can't shave my balls without fear of nicking myself. Story 24. I once told a girl I love her. It was our first date. I'm glad to hear from some of the responses that it worked out for you guys. That's awesome. However, mine didn't end so well. I told her I loved her because, honestly, we had been up all night in her car talking and having sex off and on all night. In the morning, she dropped me back off at my dorm, which is when I said what I said. It was so awkward, but I was very sleep-deprived. She laughed it off. We were just casual partners after that, but I did develop actual feelings for her, though she didn't feel the same. Very awkward. She actually messaged me years later on Facebook apologizing for how she treated me. She knew I liked her but treated me poorly. Looking back, I now realize she was just trying to get with me again. I had moved on. Way embarrassing. Story 25. I broke the tiny skin thing on the top of my penis. In French it's called freen. During sex, twice, with the same girl, and the same intern treated me in the emergency room. It was my proudest moment with tissue soaked in blood stuffed in my pants. Story 26. I was teaching a class on the basics of medieval blacksmithing to a group of freshmen. In the first 10 minutes, I managed to hit myself in the forehead with a hammer and then burn my elbow on a red-hot rod I misplaced. Story 27. I grew up in the woods and running around. Peeing on slugs was my friends and my hobby of choice. We would always see how far away we could stand from our victims while executing our urination challenges. I always won and, consequently, had a reputation within my friend group for having strong muscles. So, one day, I'm fully loaded and out slug hunting but couldn't find any slugs. I'm about to burst. So, I give up the hunt and prepare to relieve myself. Now, as I said, I was the undisputed distance champion in the group, but we had never even thought of measuring how high we could pee. So, instead of aiming out, I aim up and let it flow. Now, I didn't want to introduce a new event in our urination games if I didn't think I could win it. Obviously, I needed to know just how high my stream reached, so I looked down, and then screamed and danced around in agony in the middle of the woods with my second-grade self just flopping around and peeing everywhere like a little rogue fire hose. And that is the story of how I peed in my own eye. Story 28. Manscaping error. As a teenager, I tried to use scissors. The girl who saw it laughed. I had an accident on a first date when we went back to my place. She was outside smoking, and I had walked back inside, tried to pass gas, and had an accident. I ran upstairs as fast as possible, threw my underwear in the trash, washed the lower half of my body, and jumped back out and put on new pants. I was greeted with, "Why'd you change?" Because, I just wanted to be more comfortable. Had a sexy dream sleeping next to a platonic girlfriend. Woke up mid-dream and ran into the bathroom to manage it in the sink. I've got hundreds of these,